6 years, 2,190 days, 52,560 hours. I counted every single one of them. 6 years waiting for 3 words. I love you, Dad. 3 words my wife heard from her friends' children. 3 words I saw in adorable Instagram videos, where 2-year-olds already proclaimed unconditional love. 3 words that for me became a silent obsession, a black hole that swallowed every trace of joy from my son's achievements. Because my son is autistic. And autism, as I learned in the most painful way possible, doesn't follow the script I imagined for my fatherhood. For 6 years I waited. Not just waited, I negotiated with the universe. If he says, I love you once, just once, I promise I'll never complain about anything again. As if God were some celestial clerk interested in my desperate bargains. For 6 years, every "Hi, Dad" sounded incomplete. Every hug felt like it was missing something. Every look, no matter how deep, didn't feel enough. Because I had decided that love without words wasn't real love. That fatherhood without verbal confirmation was failed fatherhood. I was wrong. Brutally, shamefully wrong. And Epictetus, a Stoic philosopher who lived 2,000 years ago as a slave, knew exactly why. This isn't a story about the day my son finally said, I love you, because that would keep telling the wrong story. This is about the day I finally understood what it means to love, truly love, without conditions, without a script, without bargaining. It's about how Stoic philosophy, not that caricature of Stoicism that says men don't cry, but the real Stoicism of Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Musonius Rufus, taught me that expectations are the cruelest way to control those we love. And how my autistic son, in his eloquent silence, gave me the most profound lesson on unconditional love that no philosophy book could ever offer. Over the next 40 minutes, we'll cross 7 territories together. We'll talk about the child you imagined and the grief no one validates, about sleepless nights of meltdowns where hope hurts more than acceptance, about Marcus Aurelius, who lost 9 children and still wrote about love without conditions, about how to transform anxious expectation into loving presence, about why your child may be the mirror of your own wounded inner child, about the paradox that stopping your waiting isn't giving up, it's finally seeing, and about year 6, day 2090, when everything changed, but not in the way you expect. If you're a parent, grandparent, teacher, or caregiver of a neurodivergent child, and you've ever caught yourself bargaining with the universe for a phrase, a gesture, or a typical look, this story is for you. Leave a comment. What's the expectation that hurts you the most? Let's build this journey together, and if this story resonates with your soul, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Let's begin with the hardest truth. The child you imagined never existed. And that's not a tragedy, it's liberation. The imagined child, when Epictetus meets parental grief. Epictetus was born a slave. His master broke his leg for fun. He lived chained for years. And it was this man, not an emperor, not an aristocrat, who gave us the most liberating lesson in Western philosophy. There are things that depend on us, and things that do not depend on us. Simple as that, brutal as that, liberating as that. When you learned your child was autistic, that sentence should have been tattooed on your forehead. But no one told you about Epictetus in the neurologist's office. No one handed you the Enchiridion along with the reports and medical referrals. You left with papers, a diagnosis, and a hole in your chest the size of all the dreams you just buried, because you had an imagined child. That child would play soccer at school. That child would make friends easily. That child would look you in the eyes without effort. That child would say, I love you at 2 years old, like typical children do. That child would follow the script, but that child never existed. Never. And you are grieving a ghost. Here's the part no one says, the part Epictetus understood better than any modern psychologist, that grief is real, but it's useless. Not useless as in, don't feel it, cry. break apart if you must. Useless because you're suffering over something that was never under your control. The imagined child was fantasy, a projection, an expectation you built with society, with Instagram photos, with TikTok videos, with conversations at the school gate where other parents bragged about their children's verbal milestones while yours remained silent. Epictetus would say, "You're not suffering because of your real child, but because of the gap between your real child and your imagination." The pain isn't in the child, it's in the distance between what is and what you decided should be. And who created that gap? You. Not autism, not your child. You, with your expectations, your unnegotiated script, your mental checklist of developmental milestones turned into a moral ruler for your parenthood. At 3 years old, my son didn't speak. Nothing. Not mom, not dad. Silence. And every night I negotiated with God like a desperate merchant. One word, just one word, and I promise I'll accept everything. A lie. Because when he finally said water, I immediately began expecting I want water. And when he said that, I expected, Dad, I want water, please. And when he said that, I expected him to say it with a typical tone, not that flat voice that revealed his different neurology. Expectation is a monster that feeds on itself. Every milestone reached isn't celebrated. It's merely a bridge to the next demand. From his chair as a slave with his broken leg, Epictetus would look you in the eye and say, "You desire what does not depend on you. Therefore you have chosen suffering." Harsh, yes, true, devastatingly, but Epictetus didn't stop at pain. He offered a way out. The dichotomy of control isn't about giving up. It's about redirecting your energy toward what you can change. And what you can change is not your child, never was. What you can change is you, your reaction, your perspective, your ability to love without conditions, truly without conditions, not that hidden without conditions, but we disguise so well. When you release the imagined child, and it is an act of release, of opening your hands and letting the ghost drift away, you finally have space to see the real child. The child who is here, the child who doesn't say "I love you" with words, but says it in 40 other ways. You've been too busy waiting for words to notice. The child who lines up toy cars because order is his way of controlling a chaotic world. The child who doesn't make eye contact, but gently touches your face with heartbreaking tenderness. The child who doesn't say "good morning," but places his favorite toy in your hand like a sacred offering. That child has always been here. You were the one looking at the ghost. Epictetus lived in chains and died free. You live free and choose the chains of expectation. The key has always been in your hand. A question for you to reflect on. How many times a day do you compare your real child to the imagined one? And if you stopped, what would remain? Fear or love? 3 a.m., Year 3, the night I almost gave up. Waiting. 3:17 a.m., Tuesday, Year 3 of waiting. My son is screaming, not crying, screaming. That sharp, continuous sound that pierces through the silence of the night and the eardrums of anyone within 3 blocks. The neighbors had already complained 4 times. My wife was crying in the bathroom. I was in his room, exhausted, holding a pillow I almost used to muffle my own scream. And for the 1,000th time in 3 years, I thought, if only he could tell me what he feels. If only he could say, "Dad, I'm scared," or "Dad, help me," or any damn thing that would give me a clue what to do. But he didn't. He screamed. He hit himself. He tore the bedsheet off the bed for the 10th time. And there I was, a 35-year-old man, completely powerless before a 6-year-old boy who couldn't tell me what he needed. That night I understood what Seneca meant when he wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." I wasn't daring. I was waiting for him to talk, waiting for autism to get better, waiting for a miracle to descend from the ceiling and translate my son's screams into words my neurotypical brain could process. Waiting is the most cowardly form of inaction, so I stopped. I stopped waiting for him to say something. I stopped trying to decode the scream as if it were Morse code. I stopped searching for a verbal solution to a sensory problem, and I did what the Stoics call prososh, radical attention. full presence in the exact moment. I looked around the room, moonlight shining through the window, maybe too bright. I turned off the nightlight I thought calmed him. Total darkness. The screaming dropped by 10%. See? I was thinking, not seeing. I touched the sheet, rough, swapped it for one made of soft cotton, the kind my wife used. Screaming dropped another 20%. I felt the air, warm, opened the window. Cool night breeze drifted in, another 20%. I sat on the floor beside the bed, didn't try to touch him. He hates touch during meltdowns. Just sat there, breathed slowly, audibly, rhythmic, like the tide. In, out, in, out. 5 minutes, 10, 15. The screaming stopped. He didn't say, "Thank you, Dad, you." He didn't say, "I love you." He didn't say anything. He just turned on his side, hugged his worn-out teddy bear, and fell asleep. And I, on the cold floor of that room at 3:50 in the morning, finally learned what Epictetus had been trying to teach me all along. Control isn't making your child speak. Control is learning to be quiet and pay attention. The Stoic tool that saved that night wasn't abstract philosophy. It was premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, reversed. Not visualizing future disasters, but visualizing the present with all senses awake. What he wasn't saying in words, he was screaming with his body. The light hurt. The fabric scratched. The heat suffocated. He was communicating. I was the one who was deaf, waiting for a language he didn't speak. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who trained Epictetus, wrote about fatherhood. The role of a father is not to mold his child in his own image, but to discover who the child already is. My son had been telling me who he was through screams, movements, refusals, sensory preferences I kept ignoring because I was too busy waiting for full sentences. That night I stopped expecting him to adapt to my language and began learning his. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't inspirational. It was 3 a.m. on the floor, with dark circles under my eyes, a tense marriage, irritated neighbors, and 0 words exchanged. But it was the night I chose presence over absence. Since then, I've built what I call my Stoic crisis protocol, 5 steps that saved me countless times afterward. The Stoic crisis protocol: 1. Pause. Breathe. 3 seconds. Don't react. Observe. Reacting feeds chaos. Breathing feeds clarity. 2. Reverse premeditation. Ask, what in this moment might be causing this? Light, sound, texture, temperature, hunger, pain he can't name? 3. Dichotomy. You don't control the scream, you control your response. Calm is contagious. So is panic. Choose which one you'll spread. 4. Minimal action. 1 sensory change at a time. Test. Observe. Don't flood him with 10 fixes at once trying to make it stop. 5. Presence without expectation. You don't have to solve, you have to be there. Sounds simple? It is. Simple doesn't mean easy, especially when everything in you is shouting, make him stop, make him talk, make him be normal. But normal is a prison, and Epictetus knew that better than anyone. A question for you: how many of your child's meltdowns have you tried to fix with words he doesn't have? And what if the solution isn't in what he says, but in what you see? Marcus Aurelius lost 9 children. What he wrote about parental expectations. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, Emperor of Rome, Stoic philosopher, the most powerful man in the known world, and a father who buried 9 of his 13 children. 9. Let that sink in. 9 times he held a body too small for a coffin. 9 times he watched expectations turn to ashes. 9 times he had to choose between collapsing or continuing to rule the greatest empire on earth. And what did this man, who had the power to conquer nations but not to save his own children, write about parental expectations? Something that should be carved into the wall of every neurodivergent child's bedroom. Everything you hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything you see is a perspective, not the truth. Marcus Aurelius wasn't philosophizing abstractly. He was surviving concretely. Each child he lost carried imperial expectations, heirs, successors, the continuation of the Antonine dynasty. He didn't have the luxury of being just a father. He was an emperor. Every birth was a matter of state, every death a political crisis. But in Meditations, That private diary never meant to be published, written in military tents while he campaigned, he reveals something devastating. His expectations killed his children before illness ever did. Not literally, metaphorically. He expected them to be strong like him, philosophical like him, stoic like him. And when they weren't, when they died fragile, or when Commodus, the only surviving son, turned out cruel, unstable, nothing like his father, Marcus Aurelius faced the hardest truth of parenthood. You do not control who your children are. You don't even control whether they live. And if an emperor, with the best doctors in the empire, couldn't control that, what makes you think you can control whether your child says, "I love you"? After one of his losses, Marcus wrote, "Lose what must be lost without excessive sorrow. Love what must be loved without expectation of eternity." Translated from Stoic into plain English, love your child today, exactly as they are today, because expectations about tomorrow are ghosts that steal the presence of now. I read Meditations in year 4 of waiting, not for comfort. I was done with self-help cliches. Marcus didn't give me comfort. He gave me something better, responsibility. He wrote, "Unhappiness does not come from things themselves, but from our opinion about things." My son didn't make me unhappy. My non-speaking son, who lined up cars instead of playing the right way, who never said, "I love you," wasn't the source of my pain. The source was my opinion that he should be different. And here comes Marcus Aurelius's fatal blow to all parental expectations. Everything that happens rightly. Wait, what? 9 children dead? Happened rightly? Autism happens rightly? A child who doesn't speak happens rightly? Not in the sense of good or fair, but in the sense of real. It happened, it is. And you have 2 choices. Waste your energy fighting reality, or use that energy to move through it. Marcus chose the latter. Not because he was strong, but because he understood that fighting what is the definition of insanity. He loved Commodus, the cruel, unstable son, who would one day destroy everything Marcus built. He loved him anyway, because Stoicism doesn't teach you to love only the perfect child. It teaches you to love your child. In year 5, I was reading Meditations for the 3rd time when I found this line, "Accept with gratitude whatever the present moment offers." The present moment offered me a 7-year-old boy who didn't say "I love you," but who every morning religiously placed my slippers next to the bed. Always, without fail, without words. For 5 years, I ignored the slippers because I was waiting for the words. Marcus Aurelius lost 9 children and still loved the 10th. I had my son alive and beside me, and I was mourning a version of him that never existed. Who was the real emperor then? Shortly before dying, at 58, Marcus wrote his last reflection on fatherhood. Our minds are confused by desiring things that do not exist. The child who says, "I love you" at 2 years old doesn't exist. Never did. He's a hologram projected by Instagram, by toxic comparisons, by a society that measures love in decibels and milestones. Your real child, the one who lines up toy cars, who places your slippers, who touches your face instead of speaking, that child exists. That child is here. That child loves you in Autistes. Marcus Aurelius ruled the world and couldn't control his children. With all respect, you won't either, but you can do what he did. Release the expectation. Hold the child, the real one, not the imagined one. A question for you. If Marcus Aurelius, with all the power of Rome, couldn't mold his children, what makes you think you can mold yours? And what if that isn't failure, but freedom? The 4 Stoic pillars for transforming expectation into presence. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic you've probably never heard of, was Epictetus's teacher and a specialist in one subject, practical fatherhood. While Marcus wrote for himself and Seneca wrote for Nero, Musonius taught ordinary fathers. Literally. He gave lectures titled On the Education of Children and On the Role of the Father in the Family, 2,000 years ago, and yet his lessons feel more modern than any parenting course today. Musonius taught, a father must not mold his child in his own image, but discover the unique excellence that already exists within them. Unique excellence, not standardized, not comparable, unique. Your autistic child will not reach excellence by becoming neurotypical. They will reach excellence by becoming an excellent autistic person. But first, you must stop measuring with the wrong ruler. Here are the 4 Stoic pillars that transform my toxic expectation into loving presence. Pillar 1, the daily distinction. Applied dichotomy of control. Every morning, before getting out of bed, take 60 seconds for this exercise. What I control today, my reaction to his meltdowns, my tone of voice, my patience, my physical and emotional presence, my choice to see progress or lack, my decision to compare or to celebrate what I don't control today. Whether he speaks more, whether he has a meltdown at school, whether he makes friends, what other parents think, whether he tells me, I love you, the pace of his development. Musonius called this distinguishing the one's own from the alien. You're not responsible for what you cannot control. You are responsible only for what you can. For 6 months, I wrote those 2 lists every morning. At first, my can't control list had 3 items. By the end, it had 37. I had been trying to control everything. When you see the full size of your illusion of control, it loses its power. Pillar 2, the language journal, rewriting daily expectations. Every night before bed, write down the answers to these 3 questions. 1. How did my child tell me, I love you today, without words? My real examples: he placed my slippers, brought me water without being asked, held my hand 3 seconds longer than yesterday, showed me the Lego tower he built. 2. What expectation did I impose on him today that wasn't his but mine? Examples: I expected him to play properly with other kids, to eat at the table with good manners, to answer right away when called. 3. If I were autistic, how would I have experienced today? That's the question that changes everything. It puts you inside his sensory world. Cleanthes, another forgotten Stoic, wrote in his hymn to Zeus, teach us to honor what ought to be honored. You are honoring social expectations. Start honoring your real child. Pillar 3, the temporal inversion practice. Paternal memento mori. Once a week, do this brutal but necessary exercise. Imagine today as your last day with your child. Not as tragedy, just imagine the last morning, the last breakfast, the last meltdown, the last silence, the last look. Now ask, what would you do differently today if you knew it was the last? Would you still waste energy waiting for him to say, I love you? Or would you savor the fact that he's here? Seneca wrote, it is not that we have too little time, but that we waste much of it. You're wasting time with your living child, grieving an imaginary one. Memento mori isn't morbid. It's a wake-up call. It reminds you he will die. It reminds you you will die. So stop postponing presence while waiting for perfection. Since I began this practice, every Friday morning, I've never complained again about waking at 3 a.m. because of him. Because one day, I'll miss even those 3 a.m. awakenings. Pillar 4, familial oikeiosis. Applying Heracles circles. Heracles, a 2nd century Stoic, created the concept of concentric circles of concern. At the center, you, then your immediate family, then your community, then humanity. Here's the exercise. Every Sunday, draw your circles of concern from the past week. Where did you spend most of your energy? On the circle of your child, which you influence through presence, or on the circle of others' opinions, which you can't control? I discovered I was spending 70% of my emotional energy on what neighbors, relatives, teachers, and strangers thought of my son, leaving only 30% for him. Heracles wrote, the wise person draws the outer circles inward, but never pushes the inner circle outward. Translation, take care of those who are truly yours first. If you have energy left, then worry about the rest. Practical exercise for this week. From Monday to Sunday, at the end of each day, mark in your journal moments when you were present, even during meltdowns. Moments when you were absent, waiting for something. At the end of the week, count them. If you have more than, you're becoming truly stoic. A question for you. Which of these 4 pillars scares you most? That's the one you need most. The pure eternus and the senex. When your child mirrors your inner wound. Carl Gustav Jung never used the word autism in his writings. He died in 1961, years before the modern concept even existed, but he understood something no diagnostic manual will ever capture. Children don't enter our lives by accident. They arrive through synchronicity. Synchronicity is not coincidence. It's the universe conspiring to show you exactly what you need to see, especially when you don't want to see it. My non-speaking autistic son is living synchronicity. He came into my life to mirror the part of me I spent 35 years hiding. Jung identified two opposing archetypes that dance within every father: the pure eternus, the eternal child, spontaneous, creative, non-linear, and the senex, the old man, rigid, disciplined, obsessed with order. Guess which archetype dominates parents of neurodivergent children? The senex, the controller, the one who makes lists, therapy schedules, developmental charts, timelines of how childhood should unfold. And guess which archetype our autistic children embody? The puer, the child who refuses the script, who lives in their own time, who resists growing up by neurotypical standards, who remains, in a way, eternally childlike, even as an adult. An archetypal conflict. Father senex trying to control son puer. It never works, it never has, it never will. But here's what Jung would call the transcendent function, the capacity to integrate opposites. Your autistic child isn't here to be controlled. They're here to free you from the controller. Let me be brutally honest, something that took me years to admit. I wasn't waiting for my son to say, "I love you," for his sake. I was waiting for me, because if he said it, it would prove that I was a good father. It would prove that I had fixed autism with enough love. It would prove that I wasn't the failure my own father said I would be. That's the paternal complex Jung warned about. Your child doesn't just carry their own DNA. They carry the unresolved complexes of your lineage. Every toxic expectation you place on them is actually one that was placed on you and never questioned. My father never told me, "I love you." Never. He was from the silent generation, raised in hardness, where emotion meant weakness. I swore I'd be different, that I'd prove love could be spoken, shown, verbalized, and then the universe, with its perfect, cruel sense of humor, gave me a son who doesn't verbalize. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." My non-speaking son isn't my fate. He's my alarm clock. He's forcing me to confront the wound I inherited, the belief that love without words isn't real love, that silence equals rejection, that if I don't hear "I love you," I'm not loved. A lie I swallowed at 7 years old and passed on to my son before he was even born. Jung had another devastating concept: the shadow, the part of ourselves we deny, bury, and project onto others. Do you know what I hated most about my son during those first 4 years? His rigidity, his insistence on routines, his inability to go with the flow, his obsession with order. And one day, my wife, exhausted by my criticisms, said, "You're describing yourself." She was right. I am rigid. I am obsessive about routines. I have rituals for everything, I always have, but I called it discipline, organization, responsibility. In my autistic son, I called it a problem. That's projection. I hated in him what I refused to face in myself. Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." My son doesn't need to change. I do. He doesn't need to be more flexible. I need to accept that rigidity isn't a flaw. It's a survival strategy in a sensory, overwhelming world. And here's the final Jungian paradox. When you stop trying to change your child, you change. Not because you become a better parent, but because you finally become yourself. The self, in Jung's terms, is the archetype of wholeness. It's when Puer and Senex stop fighting and start dancing. It's when the wounded child within you meets the real child before you and realizes you speak the same language, the language of non-verbal love. In year 6 of waiting, I was reading Jung for the 5th time when I found this. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. My son wasn't being transformed by me. I was being transformed by him, and the transformation didn't come from him becoming more typical. It came from me becoming more human, more vulnerable, more honest about my wounds, more willing to let go of the controlling Senex and allow my inner poor to breathe again. Your autistic child is synchronicity embodied. They arrived to unearth what you buried, not to punish you, to heal you. A question for you: which part of yourself is your child mirroring? And what if they're not the problem, but the mirror? The day I stopped waiting for "I love you" and started seeing love. Year 5, day 1126 of waiting. My son was 7. I was driving home after yet another school meeting where they told me, with that condescending tone of pity, that he still doesn't verbalize affection appropriately, as if love had an instruction manual. I pulled the car over, not because I wanted to, because I couldn't keep driving through the blur of my tears. And there, alone, with the radio off and silence pressing on my chest, I had the most despairing thought of my fatherhood. Maybe he'll never love me. And then, like lightning, came the second thought. Or maybe he's always loved me, and I've been too deaf to hear it. Heracles of Alexandria, a 2nd century Stoic, created the concept of oikiosis, emotional appropriation. The idea that we are born knowing how to love, but each culture, language, and neurology expresses love differently. Greek expresses love differently than Latin, Japanese differently than English, and autistic expresses love differently than neurotypical, but it's still love. I had been waiting for "I love you" in Portuguese. My son had been saying "I love you" in autistic every single day, and I, the linguistic colonizer, kept rejecting it because it wasn't in my language. Let me show you how he said "I love you" without ever saying it. 6:47 a.m. every single day, he placed my slippers on the left side of the bed, always on the left, because he'd noticed that's the side I get out of bed from. He studied my habits like a scientist and adapted the world to make my life easier. Tell me that's not love. 7:15 a.m. breakfast. He separated the strawberries. He always ate the smaller ones and left the 3 biggest ones on my plate, without saying a word, without asking for praise. Just placed them there. Tell me that's not love. 3:30 p.m. when I got home from work. He paused his favorite show. Always paused it. Picked up the TV remote I was always losing, placed it on the coffee table, and then went back to watching. Tell me that's not love. 9 p.m. bedtime. He took his most beloved teddy bear, the one he never let anyone touch, and put it on my bed. He wouldn't sleep without that bear, but he'd place it beside me first, wait for me to lie down, borrow my scent, and only then take it back. Tell me that's not love. Heracles said love is when you take someone else's well-being and make it part of your own. My son did that. He took my comfort, my routines, my needs, and treated them with the same seriousness he treated his own. But I was waiting for 3 magic words while ignoring 300 sacred actions. Seneca once wrote a line every parent of a neurodivergent child should tattoo on their heart. Love does not look with the eyes, but with the soul. I was listening with my ears, waiting for sounds, phonemes, words, and ignoring the soul of love being poured into my life in concrete, repetitive, ritualistic actions, because that's what autism does. It doesn't remove love, it concentrates it. My son didn't scatter love into casual phrases like, "Love you, Dad," said on autopilot. He condensed love into sacred rituals. Slippers at 6:47, biggest strawberries, lost remote, shared teddy bear. But rituals scare neurotypicals. We call them repetitive behaviors. Inflexibility, obsession. How about calling them what they really are? Devotion. On day 1126, when I stopped crying on the side of the road, I went home and did something radical. I stopped waiting. Not gave up, stopped waiting. Giving up would be saying, "He'll never love me," whatever. Stopping waiting meant he's always loved me. I was the one who couldn't see. I got home. My son was on the floor, lining up toy cars by color. Didn't even look up when I walked in. Avoidant behavior, the reports would call it. I sat down on the floor next to him. Didn't speak. Didn't demand eye contact. Just sat there. 5 minutes passed. Then he picked up a blue car, his favorite, the one no one was allowed to touch, and placed it in my hand. Didn't say a word, just placed it there. Then went back to his line And I understood. Finally. He was giving me what he loved most, that in any language, on any planet, in any neurology, means I love you. Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism, once said, "The wise man does not expect virtue to appear in a specific form, but recognizes it wherever it manifests. Love in the form of words, love in the form of blue cars, still love. You just have to stop imposing the form." Since that day, I created a new ritual, one that changed everything. At the end of each day, I open my journal and write, "Today, my son said, I love you." And I fill it in with gestures, glances, shared silences, strawberries, slippers. The first month, I had 7 entries. By the 6th month, I had 243. He had always loved me. I was just waiting for captions. A question for you. How many times a day does your child say, "I love you" without words? And if you wrote your list today, right now, how many items would it have? Year 6, day 2, 190. The message I never expected to receive. Year 6, day 2, 190. An ordinary Tuesday, nothing special. My son was 8, I was 41. 6 years of Stoic practice, 6 years of dismantling expectations, 6 years of learning autistes. I was in the kitchen making coffee. He was in the living room performing his morning ritual, lining up toy cars by color, then by size, then by color again. Sacred routine, untouchable. Then he appeared in the doorway, holding a folded piece of paper, folded perfectly, of course, with 4 clean creases. He extended it toward me, didn't say a word, and walked away. I opened it. Inside, written in shaky, uneven handwriting, each letter probably taking him 5 minutes of Herculean motor effort, were 4 words. "Dad, you see me." Not "I love you." "You see me." I broke down. Right there, cold kitchen floor, coffee forgotten, world frozen, because he was right. Now I did see him, but there was something deeper in that sentence, another layer. He wasn't thanking me, he was confirming it, as if to say, "Finally, you've stopped waiting for me to be someone else and started seeing me as I am." Friedrich Nietzsche, not a Stoic, but a philosopher who understood amor fati better than anyone, once wrote, "My formula for greatness in a human being is amor fati, not to wish anything to be different, not forward, not backward, not for all eternity, not merely to bear what is necessary, still less to conceal it, but to love it, amor fati, the love of fate." For 6 years, I had tolerated my autistic son, accepted him with resignation, carried him like a philosophical burden, performed Stoicism like theater. But love, unconditional love, not despite autism, but including it, that took 2,190 days. And the message on that paper wasn't just from him to me, it was from me to myself. Finally, you see yourself, because what I saw in my son was no longer a mirror of my wounds, but a window to my healing. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "Whatever happens to you has been woven into the pattern of destiny since the beginning." My autistic son wasn't a cosmic accident. He wasn't divine punishment. He wasn't a test from God. He was exactly the son I needed to become exactly the father he needed. But it only worked when I stopped trying to change the equation. I took the paper, went back to the living room. He was still lining up cars, his back to me. I sat on the floor beside him, said nothing. 3 minutes of silence. Then he picked up the blue car, always the blue one, and placed it in my hand. And for the first time in 2,190 days, he did something he had never done before. He rested his head on my shoulder. 3 seconds, then went back to his cars. Epictetus once said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about things." I had spent 2,189 days disturbed by the opinion that love had to sound like, "I love you." Lol. On day 2,090, I discovered that love sounds like paper folded 4 times. You know what I did with that paper? I framed it. It hangs on my office wall, not as a trophy of finally he wrote something, but as a tombstone for my former self, the one who kept waiting. "Dad, you see me." 4 words in Portuguese, but in autistes they mean, "You stop trying to change me. Now it's us, real." And us real is more powerful than 1,000 automatic "I love yous." And after that day, he never wrote again. He didn't need to. The message had been delivered, received, integrated, but something unexpected happened. I started writing to him. Every night before bed, I slip a note under his pillow. Son, today I saw you when you... And I describe it. The gesture, the glance, the shared silence, the blue car, the small miracle. He never mentioned the notes. But one day, I found all of them. 87 little papers, perfectly organized by date in chronological order, inside a shoebox under his bed. He keeps them, which means they matter. Amor fati isn't passive acceptance, it's active love for what is. My non-speaking autistic son, who took 6 years to write 4 words, is my destiny, and I love him. Not despite it, because of it. Because he taught me what Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, and Jung had all tried to teach me, and what I could only learn through him. Love isn't what you wait to receive. Love is what you choose to see. A final question for you. If your child handed you a paper today, what do you wish it would say? And what if they've already been giving you that message every day, just without the paper? 6 years, 2,190 days, a lifetime of waiting. One sentence that changed everything. But it wasn't his sentence that changed everything. It was the one I finally understood. For 6 years, I waited for my autistic son to say, I love you. For 6 years he did, every single day, in 100 different languages. I was the one who couldn't hear. Slippers at 6:47, big strawberries, blue cars, shared teddy bear, lost remote found, head on my shoulder for 3 seconds. That's love. It always was. Epictetus, the slave who became a philosopher, would tell you, you're not suffering because your child doesn't love you. You're suffering because you decided love must look a certain way. Let go of the form. See the essence. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who buried 9 children, would tell you, expectations are ghosts that steal the present moment. Bury the ghosts. Hold the living child. Seneca would tell you, the wise person doesn't demand that the world bend to their will. The wise person bends to reality and finds freedom in acceptance. Jung would tell you, your child isn't your problem, they're your mirror. Heal what you see reflected. Musonius Rufus would tell you, a father's role is not to mold, but to discover. Heracles would tell you, love is taking another's good as your own. And I, just another father like you, will tell you, stop waiting, start seeing. Your autistic child is loving you right now, in their way, in their language, with an intensity neurotypicals can hardly imagine, but you're too busy waiting for subtitles. 6 years ago, I cried because my son didn't say, I love you. Today, I cry because I finally know he never stopped saying it. And the difference between those 2 tears, one was grief for a ghost, the other is gratitude for a real child. Amor fati, love your fate, not the one you imagined, the one that's here, alive, breathing, lining up toy cars, waiting for you to finally pay attention. My son hasn't changed in 6 years. I have. He's still non-speaking, still autistic, still living in his sensory world of rituals and routines. But now, I'm in that world with him, instead of waiting outside for him to leave it. And the deepest, most stoic truth I've learned, he never needed to change. I always did. Marcus Aurelius, in his final year, weary and sick, wrote his last meditation on fatherhood. Accept with gratitude what the present moment offers. The present moment offers me an 8-year-old autistic son who doesn't say, I love you with words, but says it with a folded piece of paper, and I accept, with gratitude, with amor fati, with presence. And you, if this story touched you, if you've also been waiting for years for something that's already being said in another language, share in the comments. Today, my child told me, I love you, when complete the sentence. Let's build a shared dictionary, from autistes to neurotypical, so the world can finally learn how love speaks in silence. Subscribe. Every week we explore Stoic philosophy and neurodivergence. No miracle cures, just truth. Hard, liberating, transformative truth. Share this with that parent, grandparent, or teacher who's been waiting for years. Free someone from the prison of expectation. And before you leave, do one thing. Go to your child. right now. Don't wait for the right moment. Just go, sit beside them, say nothing, demand nothing, just be there and watch, really watch. In 5 minutes they'll tell you, I love you, somehow, and for the first time you'll hear it. Until next time, amor fati.